But yeah, it doesn't seem like when you start talking to Black Lives Matter folks or critical race theorists, and they're saying that the problem is whiteness, and you start getting them to explain what they mean by that. And then I said, well, it doesn't seem like the problem is my whiteness. You've got a problem with Jesus.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
his teachings.
I agree.
So,
yeah. I don't know. Your guest last week, Monique, she said she actually used the M word. She said, oh, this is about Marxism. This is about equalizing outcomes regardless of personal responsibility. And I mean, can I talk a bit about that? Because I'm going to contrast, I want to contrast Marxism, which is the preferred BLM remedy for some of the problems they're seeing, the economic, the wealth problem. And then I want to contrast that with how Christians, like how the Bible views money. And how the Bible views, how the Bible would respond to disparities in income, because it's two different answers. So, okay, so the BLM co-founder Patrisse Cullors, I don't know how to pronounce her name, in an interview, I'll send you the link in the New York Post, she's cited as saying she and her BLM co-founder, so two BLM co-founders, they are trained Marxists.
Right.
So I'm thinking that that's their approach to these economic problems. Marxism is often,
yeah. If you're a trained Marxist, that seems to logically follow. That's at least the inference to the best explanation.
Yeah. So I just want to contrast the alternative to Marxism, which is free market capitalism, with Marxism. And the resource I have for this is maybe I'll define them first. So in free market capitalism, all that means, and there's beautiful books by Jay Richards, Money, Greed, and God, about this, or Wayne Grudem has a book out there called The Poverty of Nations. These are, I mean, Christians, you need to learn economics. I'm telling you, next to apologetics, economics is number 2 in what I would recommend to Christians.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. So free market capitalism is basically...
Why? Why is economics so important? Why is it right next to apologetics?
It's because we need to be concerned about the type of government that we live in. Try being a Christian in North Korea right now. Try being a Christian in Venezuela or Cuba when you can barely find food to eat. You will find it very difficult. And I want to get to this because money is the fuel that I use to invest in other Christians. And it is the fuel that I use to achieve Christian goals in this society. So money is very important to me, not that not that it is the acquisition of it, but it is, like I said, the fuel that you use to speak to the lives of others to achieve Christian goals. So let me just define the free market capitalism. This is where buyers and sellers decide the prices of goods and services by trading. There's no central government that controls the means of production, and there's no central government setting prices. Whereas in Marxism, the central government owns the means of production, and they actually set the prices. So a Marxist policy would be something like minimum wage or rent control, where the government steps in and says, hey, we're going to cap how much rent you can charge, or we're going to cap how little you can pay someone to do a job. Whereas a free market capitalist policy is like, let the buyer and seller agree to what is the trade, and let them both make the trade if they feel that they both benefit. So what works? So I have a resource that I love to go to with my coworkers called the Index of Economic Freedom, that's put out by the Heritage Foundation, which is a big Washington think tank. And they rank all the countries based on who has the freest economy. And I'll give you a link to this. But at the top are countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, and Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, and maybe further down, United States, and maybe in the top 10. And then at the very bottom of Index of Economic Freedom, you're going to find countries like Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea. These are the countries where the government owns the means of production and sets the prices. And what you can do is you can take that ranking, and then you can take a ranking of per capita GDP, which is the amount of wealth produced by the average citizen in those countries. What you find is the countries that are at the very top of the Index of Economic Freedom have the highest per capita GDP. So those people who are working in those countries, they produce a lot, they make a lot of money. And it may be that their net income might be lower because of higher taxes, maybe not in Hong Kong, but maybe in a country like Norway does pretty well. They're up there. Ireland is up there, but they may have high taxes, but the amount produced by the people who live there is very high, because they can get jobs, they get good educations, they produce a lot, and it causes them to be paid a lot, and that means that their standard of living is high. So let me give you another couple of interesting examples. Everybody probably has heard about Venezuela. Venezuela is pretty near where my parents are from. And I follow people from my parents' country, and they're complaining about the refugees from Venezuela that they're getting. And Venezuela used to actually be a very wealthy country before they elected Hugo Chavez, and they went communist. Now they're very poor. So they were doing well in the index of economic freedoms. Now they're very low, and they're also very poor. But Chile, which is another country in South America, they used to be very poor in like the 1960s. They redid their entire economy to go full-blown free market capitalism, and now they're ranked number, I think, 15 on the index of economic freedom, and their per capita GDP is like $25,000 per person, which American dollars. So this is like a bunch of people who used to, struggle to feed themselves. Now they're like buying televisions and owning multiple cars, and it's because they freed up their economy. So, I guess my last point about communism is you should look up a book called The Black Book of Communism, published by Harvard University Press. It talks about countries that have implemented communism, and they have they've racked up 100 million dead people. And there's a reason for that. It's because when the government takes over the means of production, it causes a lot of shortages in terms of food. And typically they get the military involved to control the people. And they have concentration camps, death camps. You can find that today in North Korea. Yeah. So I don't think this is the answer, is the point I'm trying to say.
That what particularly is the answer?
Marxism is not the answer to how we're going to make black people more wealthy. I want black people to be more wealthy. I like the fact that non-whites in America, like Indians and Nigerians, are doing, West Indians, are doing really well. Okay, so skin color isn't the problem. And Marxism is definitely not the solution to the wealth disparities.
Marxism seems to be a problem historically and even today in the world, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question based on that. Why do you think it is that Marxism and Christianity don't get along?
Yeah. So I think that is a great question. So in Christianity, in Marxism, the biggest problem is, his theory is that more automation is going to cause the workers to have less and less money and make the people at the top be much, much richer. So he basically is concerned with wealth inequality, and he's prescribing solutions to solve the problem of wealth. And he thinks of religion as a distraction. It's the opiate of the people. Mm-hmm. But really, he's a materialist. He believes in Darwinism. He doesn't believe in God. He doesn't believe in souls. And he thinks that the biggest problem that humans are facing he believes he has to redo the economy in order to share the wealth more equally. Yeah. So in Christianity, this is not the biggest problem. And I've been watching some lectures from Vadi Bakum, and I follow Samuel Say on Twitter. I think that's his name. He writes a blog called Slow to Write, and these guys are black theologians, and what they're saying is the biggest problem in Christianity is separation from God. You're separated from God because of your sin. You're in rebellion against God. You're not seeking after God, and it's not a problem that can be solved by shuffling wealth around. Okay. In Christianity, race doesn't make a difference. What makes the difference is Jesus died for your sins, and your access to that salvation is a free gift from God to you. Now, I know you and I are both middle knowledge, free thinkers. So we agree that humans have a responsibility, humans have a choice, but we also agree that God does all the lifting. So all the work of saving you is done by Jesus on the cross.
Right.
Yeah. So we just have to accept it. and it's a completely different set of problems. And I think in terms of how do we live as Christians, we follow Jesus, and what I see Jesus doing in the New Testament is a lot of self-denial, a lot of patient enduring of suffering, including insults and being beaten. He doesn't seem to think that his lack of wealth is the biggest problem and that government needs to be the solution to that problem. I think Christians typically are expected to be patient in their suffering, and that their focus, if you look at how Jesus responds to the question, what is the greatest commandment, the focus is on loving God and then loving your neighbor.
Right.
And there's nothing in there about having as much stuff as your neighbor and ignoring God. So I think that that's the difference. So I had a quote here from C.S. Lewis, regarding that loving your neighbor and loving God. I think that money is an issue, okay? And the lack of money is an issue. What C.S. Lewis says is this. He says this in Mere Christianity. He's got a chapter in there called The Three Parts of Morality, and he says this. He's comparing humans to a fleet of ships sailing in formation. So each human being is a ship, and they're all sailing towards a destination. So what makes a good ship is you need to know where you are going as a ship. You need to not collide with other ships, and you need to be seaworthy and have your engines in good order. And I think that the Bible does have some recommendations about how to be seaworthy and have your ship in good order. So what I think the Bible says about money is that it doesn't praise spending money in order to communicate status to other people, and it doesn't praise coveting money. There's actually a commandment against coveting, which is looking at your neighbor's wealth and saying, wow, I really need to have what they have in order to be happy, and this is a priority. It's not only is this not a priority, Christians, this is actually sin. You need to not be looking at your neighbor's stuff and saying, I need that. You need to not be stealing from your neighbor, and you need to not be defrauding your neighbor in order to make money. So Christians need to focus, I think, on their education, and they need to focus on working. 2 Thessalonians 3:10 says that people who don't work, neither should they eat. And I think in general, we should seek to look at material possessions in light of eternity, and not make these things the priority. And I'm saying this as someone who has a good education, a good career, and has saved a lot of money. This money is just fuel for the gospel. It is not meant to make you fulfilled in any way. So I would recommend people really check out the book of Philippians, which is my favorite book, where Paul talks about partnering with other Christians in the gospel and the receiving of gifts in order to put the gospel forward. In Philippians 4, he talks about how people have sent him gifts, but his delight is to have fellowship with Christians and to partner with them to achieve goals. And in my case, for me, applying Christianity to my life, my goals are typically mentoring other people, and that can involve sending them books, just listening to them, and also giving to charity. And I want to talk more about that later, because I think that that's a very, very important thing. So basically my motivation for getting this education, working this job, things that are hard for me, and saving money rather than spending it like a consumerist or a thrill-seeking hedonist, but just instead saving the money, investing and saving, is so that I can speak to other Christians in love with charity and mentoring. But just basically that's my motivation for doing this. It's not about greed. It's not about envy. It's not about comparing myself to other people. It's about, I need to be in ship shape, like C.S. Lewis says. I need to be seaworthy and have my engines in good order, so that I can then turn to other people and say, what do you need? And what are you doing for the gospel? I want to come alongside you and help you.
Well said. And Freethinking Ministries would not exist if it wasn't for a few men who have that same attitude. I'm all about capitalism, because capitalism, when Christians make money, they fuel the church and they fuel other ministries. and I'm a direct result from that. So I encourage Christians to make as much money as they can and then give as much of it away as they can. And a lot of, the stereotype out there is that people don't do that. Well, I think Christians do, really. I mean, people who take the Bible seriously, who are also making a lot of money, support so many other ministries and churches, and it's the fuel that keeps us going. So I'm very thankful for people with a heart and attitude like you have. So you mentioned why Karl Marx in particular doesn't jive with Christianity, why he himself wouldn't. Is it possible to take his economic ideas and apply them to a nation and still, while still letting Christianity flourish? And even if it's possible, why, if you don't think even if you would say it's possible, but you don't think it probably would, why would you say it probably wouldn't? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And I really recommend everybody to answer that question. Check out Jay Richards. Jay Richards is the one who got me interested in economics, okay?
Really?
I emailed him once and I said, hey, I saw your lecture on Stand to Reason, Jay. That was amazing. What are you talking about? About economics at the end. And he said, oh, economics is great. You need to read Thomas Sowell and F.A. Hayek. And I said, really? Well, all right. And so, yeah, he's the one who got me started in this. And from Thomas Sowell, I branched into, Walter Williams and different people, like that. Free market economics is just fantastic. And so to give you the answer, like, say you were living in a country that had like single payer healthcare. Okay. So like a country like Canada, for example, they have single payer healthcare there, and they have abortions as part of their healthcare. So every pro-life Christian in Canada who pays taxes is paying into a system where abortion is subsidized. So that's what happens when you let the government take over things, is that it's a secular government in Marxism. It's not a bunch of Christians in Marxism going, hey, let's allocate taxpayer money to William Lane Craig debates. This is not what they're doing, okay? They're not giving money to Freethinking Ministries, which which sounds like a wonderful idea. But so when you're a Christian taxpayer in a Marxist country, what you're doing, let's say you enact this, what you're doing is you're asking for more and more of your money, because Marxist countries typically have massive taxation. If you look at the European countries, like say countries that are further to the left than us, like say Sweden, although people will correct me, those countries have come back from the Marxism that they had embraced because it didn't work. So some of them are
that easy to come back from Marxism.
No, but they're doing it. Some of those countries are now coming back, from that. So for countries that have embraced Marxism, the individual tax rates are something like, maybe 40 to 60%. So if you're living in like, France or Germany, I think has a bit lower taxes. But that would terrify an American. And the reason why is because as a Christian, you need the freedom to earn this is such a good question, and things are occurring to me as I'm answering it. So I fear working in a system where the government is so large that they are regulating my industry. So for example, suppose I was a Christian doctor, and the only place I could work as a Christian doctor in a country like Canada was in the single payer healthcare system. And they said, you will do sex changes, you will perform abortions, you will approve of this transgender child's transition. Where am I going to go to work now, Tim? The government runs healthcare. And this is the problem. A man with a conscience, a woman with a conscience, cannot work in a system where a secular government has that much power. What you want to do is you want to work in a free market where if your employer says, hey, I don't like what you believe about abortion, I don't like what you believe about same-sex marriage, you say, okay, I'm going to leave and I'm going to go next door to another person who provides these services, and I'm going to work for them. And that's what happens in a free market. You can always find somewhere else to work. You keep more of your own money. You can always find somewhere else to work. You don't have to toe the government line in order to make a living and eat. and lead a family. And when you want to put your kids in school, you have options. You don't report your kids to the government schools where they're going to be indoctrinated in, Soviet or Nazi propaganda. You can homeschool, you can private school, you can parochial school. You have options in a free society. And more important, you have the money to make the decision about where your kids are going to go. So I'm just trying to give you the basic answer. It's never worked out well for Christians to allow a secular government to take over healthcare, education, and many things like that. We need freedom and we need money to chart our own course. Mm-hmm. We've got to be able to make our own decisions if we're expecting to lead our families to achieve the results that we want to achieve. No secular government is going to spend our money on what we want. No secular government is going to agree to Christian goals. This is just not possible.
So do you think that's why it's common for many Marxist or communist countries that they actually, the nation or the government persecutes the church and persecutes Christians? Is that the reason why you think? Because
yes,
they're conscious and will speak against what they're doing, or
precisely. Okay. If I'm trying to run a Christian life plan in North Korea, it's a death penalty for owning a Bible. Okay, so if I want to come and teach my children the Bible, or I want to have Bible study in my house, you're dead if they catch you. So they don't like that there's an alternative worldview with an alternative hierarchy of values that competes with Marx's materialism. They want your allegiance to be to the state and to believe that the people who are the elites who are making decisions in government know better than you how to spend your money, how to raise your family. And there are actually cases like this. There's a case in Canada where the school teachers will try to transition a child against the wishes of the parents. And if the public school is government funded, the hospital is government funded, the courts are taxpayer funded, the judges are taxpayer funded, where are you going to go to fight this?
I see. That makes sense. So one more spin-off question to that.